I suspect I'm going to make some people mad at me with this video, particularly if people are on one side or the other of the issues in this case. I can't pretend, though, that something that's staring me in the face isn't there. I understand why people want to think in black and white. Something's good or bad, this way or that way. But people are messy. You can be a perpetrator and a victim. People are good and bad. So that's your first warning. The second warning is the things that are discussed in this video are disturbing, and some people might not want to hear it. And the third warning is, if you were hoping for a clear cut, here's the answer, here's how it is, I don't have that for you. The video I'm using, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Rottweiler Investigations, who gave me permission to use the video. I will include a link in the description to their full video, because you're not seeing it all here. Getting this kind of footage is a big pain in the butt, and not everything is available to everybody. So when another creator is willing to share that, I'm really grateful.
Were you supposed to work today or no?
But we also know that Shanda told him to turn on his alarm for 6 a.m. to make sure he was up early. Why'd he need to get up early if he didn't have to work? I can't help but wonder if she wasn't setting him up to find Timothy. I don't know that, but it is a thought that has crossed my mind several times.
Are you working 2 different jobs? Did you say you're working 2 different jobs?
No, I used to work 2 different jobs.
I heard you say that.
In Oklahoma.
What kind of jobs were you doing then?
Fast food.
Okay.
And I had one before, and then after I graduated from an alternative school early, I started a second one that was by my biological father's demands, basically.
Okay. Have you talked to him at all recently, biological father? Does he know kind of what's going on? Or?
I don't think quite yet. Last time we talked to him was last week.
What is your relationship like with him? I mean, do you associate with him at all or not really?
Not really. I found out that a lot of what he's told me about my biological mother up here was nothing more than blatant lies.
We've learned he went to an alternative school. He mentioned that here. And that biological dad made him get a second job. Now, we don't know why that is yet. We're going to find out. And then he thinks he finds out that his father has lied about his mother. Let me ask you this. Have you or do you know anybody who's been involved in a divorce or a custody battle where one parent is lying about the other, or maybe both parents are lying about each other and telling the kids, oh, your father doesn't care about you or your mother doesn't care about you, and think about what that does to a kid's head. So we know he's grown up with this belief that his mother doesn't love him, doesn't care about him. As we go through, because he's an adult now, right? Think about the foundations of belief systems, think about self-esteem and all of that. Just keep those things in mind. The other thing that we do know about Paul, and I don't think the police knew this at the time, but we heard in court that he has reactive attachment disorder. And it's known that that is a result of severe abuse and neglect. So we know that his childhood and his foundation was not good. And it was so bad, in fact, that it's impacted him long term.
We stopped the food restrictions recently because we had noticed his thin. We wanted to get that back on. We didn't want any of this. We never wanted him to be injured or hurt. I loved him so much.
Yeah, I can tell that. I can certainly tell that. When you say we, you're talking about your mother.
Yes, she loved him. We wanted what's best.
Yeah.
The thing is, he was stuck in the past.
Okay. What,
Notice the use of we. Again, I think I've addressed this before in one of my previous videos. And he's saying we didn't want him to be hurt or injured while they're actually torturing him. So that makes me question, what is his version of hurt or injured? What does that mean to him? And he says they stopped the food restrictions recently, and he's lying again. We know that's not true.
2 weeks, approximately. We were hoping that we could get enough where it would be safe, and then we could continue to add it back to where we wouldn't have to worry, and we could...
What were the restrictions?
We made sure...
So that's telling too. Even in the concept, even though they didn't really completely stop these food restrictions, right? The idea behind it is not to make him better, to make him healthy, to make him comfortable because it was wrong. None of that. The purpose behind giving him food was basically to keep him alive so that they could continue doing what they were doing. So the idea wasn't to kill him, it was to torture him.
We did take away his devices. Okay. Because that was also because he wouldn't stay on his school sites and would just go and try and play games or watch YouTube.
Okay.
The thing is, he should have been held back so much.
Yeah.
But he passed all of his final exams. So I don't think it was my stepmother. My stepmother was amazing.
Yeah.
But I believe it was my father's doing.
Okay. Helping him pass.
So Paul is under the impression, or at least feeling like he needs to give the impression, that Timothy shouldn't have passed, but he somehow did pass his final exams. And Paul is blaming the father. And of course, I was never in that house, so I don't know. But all of this is giving me the hallmarks of parental alienation. There is anything that's wrong is my father's fault. Now, I'm not saying dad is an angel because it is impossible. Given everything I've seen and heard, it is impossible for dad to have been an angel and these kids to end up in the situation they're in. So that's not what I'm saying. However, Paul is blaming dad. And I suspect that Shanda had something to say to Paul, or ideas to put into his head about what should or shouldn't happen with Timothy and his schooling. You see, Shanda had to have a reason or an excuse or a justification that she could state outwardly to keep Timothy home from school, to not enroll him. She couldn't say to Paul, I'm actually not allowed to have you guys, so I have to not put him in school because I have to hide things. She can't say that to him. She has to maintain control. She has to present to him that she knows everything and she knows best. And dad, in terms of school, failed Timothy, and therefore Shonda's going to take care of that, and she will homeschool him.
Did you share a room with him then?
Yes, and it absolutely smelled. Because even then, even when the bathroom was literally just a couple feet away, he wouldn't get up and go.
Okay. And what is that? You kind of told me about it yesterday, but...
So Paul's talking about when they lived in Oklahoma. When Paul and Timothy lived with dad in Oklahoma, one of the things that I learned is that Timothy was afraid of the bathroom, particularly at night. During the trial, I was unaware of this, and I think there was a time when Shanda said something about Timothy wanting to sleep in the bathtub. And hearing this now, I mean, that's not true. The boy was afraid of the bathroom. And that raises another question. Why? There's a reason for that. So something else happened to Timothy before he ever went to Shanda.
I have ADHD.
Okay.
And I think they said I was diagnosed with sensory processing, but from what my mother has told me, that's just no.
What is that? I'm not sure.
Did you hear that? He believes he was diagnosed, right? A doctor, a professional diagnosed him, and he believes his mother's diagnosis over the doctor. So mom says no, that's not the case, and that is who he chooses to believe.
Sensory processing.
It's basically when you overreact to things way too much.
Yeah.
I guess loud noises and things and bright lights are disturbing. For me, there's not really any of that. The only problems I have is when someone's music has a lot of bass drumming in it.
Okay.
For me, that'll feel like someone's smashing my ribs with a mallet.
Okay.
That's why I don't hardly listen to music very high if it's got bass drums, because it hurts.
Yeah, that would make sense. Did you go to school?
Yes, I went to the school back in Oklahoma. I graduated from Santa Fe High School.
Okay.
I've even got the diploma and I stand in my room.
Okay. You graduated from high school. What you kind of do after that? You just...
I know that my father had kicked me out after, in May 2 years ago or so.
So May of 20?
20, yeah. And due to COVID, the graduation had been postponed to July. And I managed to get my bio mom's number at that point and was capable of talking to her and telling her how all of this had happened.
Yeah.
And I also asked some of the things about what Dad had told me, the whole, did you really not care?
Right.
And from what he told, and I'm pretty sure it's scientifically impossible, that she had her tubes undone for Gabriel, which, from what I'm guessing, that's an impossibility, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
So he's a miracle. He's a little miracle child.
Fair enough.
He's a blessing to this world.
Yeah. Does your mom feel like that? Certainly. That he's a blessing.
Of course.
Yeah.
She loves him so much.
Yeah.
She loved every single one of us, but my dad's controlish, freaky nature was just... He didn't want her having any contact and screwing all of his control up.
Okay.
And that was the thing.
So what are you hearing here? Are you hearing parroting? He's parroting what he's been told by Shanda. And Dad kicked him out. So we don't know if it's because, hey, bud, you're old enough, out you go. We don't know why. We know Dad isn't a nice guy either, though. So Mom takes him in. Is he going to be grateful? And having lived a great portion of his childhood, believing that his mother didn't love him, and he finds, oh my gosh, she does love me. What a big deal that would be for him. And how angry would he be at his dad? So how much control is Shanda getting right there?
Thing back in Oklahoma where I had problems with emotional release. I was so terrified of him that I didn't ever want to release any of the negative emotions I ever had around him. There were times where I wanted to say no, but I was so terrified that I just couldn't.
Yeah.
This tells us something, not only about his past, but his present. One of the things that I notice is he does a lot of physical sort of protective movements or to release energy, to soothe himself, all of those things. And it makes sense. And it makes sense that you're not seeing weeping and wailing and all of that because he has been taught or he learned as a coping mechanism to not display any emotion. Displaying emotion is dangerous. And you'll see kids who have suffered not cry. They know it's dangerous and they know nobody's coming to help them. So that can carry over into adulthood. So you might see someone with a flat affect or their affect seems a little weird. And this is one possible reason. So when you're not seeing him being very emotive, don't assume that he's not feeling anything. He's learned to suppress all of that.
My dad was strict. He didn't even give me a phone. My sister and my stepsister had phones before I did. And that was due to the fact that he could not raise a male.
Dad could not raise a male. What does that sound like something coming from a 20-year-old boy? Does that sound like something at his level of education and life experience that he's coming up with that? His life is playing video games and going to work in fast food and taking care of things for people. Does that maybe sound like Shanda?
I know we talked yesterday about how you're paying bills and
yep, and unlike my father, she doesn't force me to give her half of my paycheck. He forced that on me. And I was working basically minimum wage at both.
Yeah, that's tough.
It was nightmarish. And the thing,
There's so much to unpack in every little piece. I mean, I can't possibly do it justice. He was forced to pay bills to hand over half his paycheck to his father. And earlier he said he had to work 2 jobs because his father demanded it. He'd previously told the police that while living with Shanda, he's paying groceries and he's paying bills. So he's working in fast food and he's helping to carry the financial weight around the house. Now, what does that tell you? And what does that tell you about maybe Shanda's motivations? What does Shanda get? So she's not going to mistreat him the way she mistreats Timothy because she needs him to be her cat's paw, among other things. Have you ever been in a situation that was really cruddy, and then you go from that situation to another cruddy situation, but it's less cruddy, so it feels like it's great? I mean, everything's relative, right? So he's so terrified of the father, and the father is demanding and very overt, by the sounds of it, in his maltreatment. Whereas Shanda, she's still taking from him, but she just does it in a different way. So this is going to feel like she's great. So add that to the list of things that are going to impact his perception of everything. I don't think he has any idea what normal is, what normal life is like. I don't think he has any idea what a good parent is like.
Okay.
and we had put him in my stepmother and father agreed on this, that he could be institutionalized. And when he got back, the first couple of weeks were good. He didn't misbehave, but then after that, it just reverted back to what he was doing before. Okay. The destructiveness and everything.
Timothy was actually institutionalized for a period of time. That can create behaviors too. Interestingly, though, when he returned, now they're still in Oklahoma at this point, when he returned, he was actually seeming better. And after a couple of weeks, he reverted back to his old behaviors. Now, what does that tell you? That tells you a lot about the environment.
Basically gone, right?
Yeah.
No wonder he can't stand or something along the lines.
Yeah. But the thing is, before yesterday, and I think the day before, he could walk. He might need a little support every so often, like he put his hand against the wall or grab the rail of the stairs. But after a couple of seconds, he'd let go and be fine.
Okay.
He has no concept, seemingly, of how serious that is, of how bad that is. What 15-year-old should need support against a wall to walk? I mean, it sounds like we're talking about someone who's, 100 years old. And he's, but it was only a little bit.
The water doesn't exactly go cold.
Okay.
It says there's a cold button, but it's basically sort of lukewarm-ish.
How many times would you estimate that you guys gave cold baths as a part?
This is minimization. And I'm not sure here if he's minimizing for his own sake, for Shanda's sake, or both.
But the thing was, the loft bed, if you've noticed, the screws and stuff, that was his doing.
Okay.
And we couldn't get it safely back.
So
this stuff, it just makes me so angry. The loft bed. Whether or not he took the screws out, who knows? Paul is saying, well, it's not safe. Where do you suppose he got that idea? If they couldn't fix the bed, think about how much money did they spend on camera equipment and cuffs and zip ties and leg shackles. How much money did they spend on that stuff? On the hottest hot sauce that they could find. If you took that money and pooled it, maybe you could come up with something to fix the bed or a new bed or put the mattress, take it apart then. If you really don't have it, I understand you need a new bed, and if you have no money, you have no money. You could at least put the mattress on the floor. But did they do that? No. He's in the closet. He's in the closet with a tarp. And that closet eventually gets locked up. So Paul is giving a justification. I think that Shanda gives Paul a justification. We need to do this because your brother's not safe and we have to take care of him. So we can't let him sleep in that loft bed. And he broke it anyway.
Yeah, there's some food in there that he would try and sneak. Right. And it wasn't just that he was hungry at some points for those. It was that he wanted something sweet. And at times he would be taking stuff that was going to have plans for food, actual food.
Yeah, I agree. I see exactly what you're saying.
And
he's justifying. Well, this wasn't because he was hungry. It's because he wanted sweets. Look at. I had a teenager, and I know that you planned on something for supper, and you go in the fridge to get it, and your kid has eaten it. These things happen in households. And most of us don't resort to putting locks on doors. We may resort to teaching. Aside from all that, this is justification and rationalization. And I don't think it's necessarily coming from Paul, because we know that he has swallowed what Shanda has told him. You're dealing with one monster and you move out of the house from that monster and you're dealing with a different monster, but that second devil is wearing a smile on his face, on her face, and so it seems all nice.
I think we truly had started activating the alarm on the door every night after we had found that he would sneak out and get back up on to his loft bed, where, like I said, that thing was.
So this boy wants to get onto his bed. This boy does not want to sleep in his closet. And by the way, do you remember in Shanda's testimony, she said, he asked to sleep in what she calls the small room. It's a closet. Meanwhile, he's sneaking out because he wants to sleep in a bed. And Paul's justification, again, the justification is, well, it's dangerous.
It was dangerous at that point because he had been screwing around with the bolts and screws, and at any point it could have given way and he could have gotten seriously injured.
Right, yeah.
Where do you suppose that justification about the bolts, the screws in the bed, where do you suppose that came from? If it's Paul making up this justification and Shanda was innocent in that, well, there would actually be no issue because he wouldn't have been in the closet in the first place. Because she would have put the mattress on the floor, got a new bed, or called somebody to help her, or any number of things other than locking him in the closet. So Paul wasn't in charge of that in terms of, making that decision. Again, I think he's parroting the justification. I think he has believed what Shanda has told him.
Why was it that he couldn't have meals?
I mean, the whole switching, I don't know.
Because he was sneaking food?
A lot, yeah,
Paul isn't actually sure. You can see it. He's searching his mind for, what actually really is the reason why we're doing this? I think that at the time that he was engaging in this, it made sense. He figured Mother had a reason for this and that it must be legitimate. And when he's actually asked the question, he really doesn't know. And he doesn't start talking about it or giving an answer until the detective offers him one.
What dictates whether or not there's hot sauce on the he's eating? What decides that?
I don't know. Whenever my mother told me to put hot sauce on it, I did. It was normally a thin layer to make sure that it wouldn't be too much, because...
So he doesn't know why. then he goes on to minimize it. Well, it's a thin layer. It's really hot sauce. So, I didn't put too much on. But the rationale and the motivation is not clear to him. He's doing what his mother says. And I know that people will say, my gosh, I mean, you can't just use the excuse I was following orders. You can't just, he could have said no. There are all kinds of arguments there. And I hear you, believe me, because Paul wasn't 10 years old or 12 years old here. Okay. You've all heard about the electric shock experiment, yeah? So for those of you who already know what I'm talking about the electric shock experiment, you can fast forward a little bit because I'm going to talk about it. For those of you who don't know, years and years ago, Stanley Milgram ran an experiment. There was a big question about why in World War II in Germany did people follow these horrific orders? Why is that? So Milgram wanted to look at people's responses to authority. So what they did was they took ordinary people. Now these are adults. And remember, your brain isn't fully developed until you're into your 20s. So Paul's brain isn't fully developed. Even if he had a good foundation and a good childhood and a decent frame of reference, even then, he's still not all there. I'm not saying absolutely here, oh, he's not responsible. I'm throwing out concepts here. Anyway, in this experiment, this electric shock experiment, the researchers took normal adults and told them they would be helping in this study, and they lied to them about what the study was about. So the subjects in the study didn't know what the real purpose was. They told them, okay, you're going to be the teacher and you're going to have like a student or a subject. So when your student gives a wrong answer, you're going to give them an electric shock. You're going to push this button and they will get an electric shock. And if they continue to give wrong answers each time, the voltage on that electric shock increases. And it increases up to the point where it's going to cause the other person severe pain. Okay? They have this guy in a lab coat walking around, just sort of monitoring these subjects. And the people would be giving electric shocks to their subjects, believing that they're causing great pain. And a number of the people who were in the role of teacher really struggled with this and would say to the guy in the lab coat, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is good. I'm not comfortable with this. I think this is hurting this person. And the person in the lab coat, who can't actually harm them even, right? They have no personal investment even. It's not like a mother and child or spouses or anything. This is a guy in a lab coat. Says, well, you agreed that you would do this in this study, so you have to give the shock. And they did. A number of the participants ended up just psychologically really harmed by this experiment. I mean, they would never allow this now. It would be considered unethical. But what I'm saying to you and what they were surprised to find is that even without coercion, even without any threat to themselves, seemingly normal adult people caused harm, or believed they were, right? There was not really an electric shock, but they caused harm and pain to other people because they were told to. So, and there's another whole theory, agency theory. I'll let you Google it. So there are studies that show that people will follow orders even if they're not being threatened. People will listen to authority even if they're free to walk away. So just, that's something to think about. Now add that can happen to a normal person. Add that to this guy who believes that, he's found his mother and it's an escape from his father and she really loves him, something he hasn't had. And he's helping and she's telling him to do something. And he figures, well, she knows what she's doing. You could see how he would just not really question it enough. I'm not saying he didn't know it was wrong. I'm not saying he's not capable of understanding that it would be painful. If he didn't understand that it would be painful, he wouldn't be sitting here now minimizing. If he thought it was all okay, he wouldn't try to minimize it. He wouldn't be saying, oh, just a thin layer. So he knew that it would cause pain. He knew that this was a punishment.
That he doesn't seem to be responding, that he can't walk very well, that he's stumbling. I think you mentioned those things too.
Yeah.
What was her response to those things?
I think she was thinking, because there was one point where he did that, but it was before he was thin.
Yeah.
And it scared the crap out of me, but then he admitted to my mother later that day while I was at work that it was an act.
Okay.
So
he admitted to Mother that it was an act, but Paul never heard that admission. So the only way Paul knows this is because he got this information from Shanda. Now let me ask you something. Does she have motive to lie about this? Yeah. Have you ever had anyone lie about you? Have you ever had anybody tell stories about you? Say you're something that you're not. Say you're bad when you didn't do anything. Try and negatively affect other people's perceptions of you. And if the person lying is good at it, they won't tell an outrageous lie. They may include a little grain of truth. You know how narcissists recruit their flying monkeys, right? I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but it's awful. It's insidious. There are people who just go around setting up, planting these negative seeds about people around them in case they ever need to water those seeds and add to that. So if Timothy is bad, or if Timothy is faking, well, if he's not truthful, then if he ever gets a chance to tell anybody what's happening to him, he might not be believed. So again, this is not Paul who said that Timothy was faking. This is Paul parroting what Shanda has told him, and he believes. So all that justification is being given to Paul to make him okay with doing these things to his brother, to overcome the cognitive dissonance that would have to be there.
So the hot sauce on bread, if you ever put hot sauce on bread, was it ever your own decision to put hot sauce on bread?
No.
Sometimes you were left in charge of the two kids, right?
Yes.
How often was that you were in charge?
Sometimes it was during the mornings where she would go to work, but around 3-ish, I would have to go to work myself. She would be home after around 6 o'clock from work, and at that point, she would ask me to have them both go to Gabriel and Timothy to go to their rooms, which, for him at that point was the closet, and Gabriel's was downstairs as well. Gabriel would take his tablet because if there's one thing we both know, it's that he's also very dependent on that. It's something that keeps him calm and collected.
Correct me if I'm wrong, okay? My understanding is that G was only 7 years old at this time. So she's leaving. She knows that Paul has to go to work. So Timothy gets locked in the closet, and the 7-year-old is upstairs in the bedroom on the tablet. So nobody's watching this special needs kid, and nobody's watching the 7-year-old, and Shanda is aware of that because Shanda set up a rule. So, I mean, mother of the flippin' year. I'm sorry. I know this video was supposed to be about Paul, but she just, there have been or situations where a parent leaves a child home alone thinking, I'm only going to be gone for an hour, and there's a fire at the house, and they lose their child one way or another. If Timothy's locked in the closet and the 7-year-old's upstairs, what if there's a fire? What if there's... Okay. I gotta get back on track. This woman just makes my brain explode. I've seen a lot of things, but she takes the cake.
So she's able to communicate with them that way. She's communicating with you via text.
Yes, Timothy doesn't have anything to text with. He does, but I don't think, because we couldn't trust him on devices, so we couldn't exactly.
What do you want to bet that Timothy didn't have anything to text with? Because Shanda couldn't risk him asking for help.
Take the shower curtain down so I can see him. Didn't she ask you that the day before he passed away?
Yeah.
So we talked about some of that stuff. Remember how during the conversation I said, I know what this pepper's for. It's for punishment. And what did she say? She said, oh, I didn't know anything about that. Right? Why do you think she's saying those things? Why do you think
she doesn't want to appear like a bad person. She doesn't want to be the bad guy in this. We never wanted any of this. We want him to be healthy. I know that for a fact. We should have been so much. I should have at least put my foot down on something.
Right.
But it's not that I'm afraid of her. I can't fear her because she's not the type to instill fear.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's all.
That kind of fear that he's accustomed to is not what she uses as her tool for control. She is more subtle than that, or it would appear subtle to him compared to what he's used to. Some people think that if somebody isn't threatening something that is life and death and overtly physical and obvious and extreme, that it's inconsequential. That's not the case. Have you ever been, even as an adult, in a relationship with somebody who has gaslit you? And Paul is apologizing for his mother's behavior. He recognizes she doesn't want people to think I'm a bad person. Whether he articulates it consciously in his brain or not, he does recognize that. His pronouns were different in his testimony, but at this point, he's trying to sort of get the officer to be understanding of Shanda. And when it comes time for taking responsibility or not, he starts with, we should have. Not she should have. We should have. And then moves to I should have. So he's aware that he should have done something. Did he think that at the time all this was going on? Who knows? But he's saying, I should have put my foot down. And he comes out and clearly says, I was not afraid of her. So he's saying he's not physically afraid. I think this guy doesn't even recognize the control tactics being used on him. I think he has no clue because he's bought into it, hook, line, and sinker. Does that mean that what he did is okay? No. But, it's not black and white. It's just another thing to think about, to put on the pile.
We know those things aren't okay.
I know that. We've tried so many different things. We're running out of options of trying to find a punishment that would actually work. And even that did nothing.
Right.
And we still kept trying though. I don't know why.
So you have the hot sauce. Tell me about that.
Looking for punishments that would work. It's as if punishment is the only option. That's the frame of reference.
When my mother was at work, she'd have me log in before she'd leave. I'd come upstairs and go back to sleep on the couch. I'd set an alarm normally for 10:30 to 11:30 so that I could wake up and be up to keep things going around the house, keep everything in order.
Okay. So
she never did any of this to be harsh.
I'm in no way questioning whether your mom cared or anything.
He says she never did this to be harsh. So again, he is excusing her. He is still trying to protect her. And notice the times when he lies and what he lies about and when he doesn't lie. Notice he does minimize a bit when it comes to his own responsibility, but he minimizes and justifies far more when it comes to her. So he's protecting her. the point at which he begins to see her for who and what she actually is would be psychologically dangerous for him. Because what does he have? And then what does that say about him to himself? His reality will crumble away. He's going to have to face, and he will. He's going to have to face the reality of what he did to his brother and the reality of what was done to him to Paul by his father and by his mother, and the reality and how it feels to realize, my gosh, I fell for it. I was complicit. That's if he gets therapy. That's if he goes down a good path. I hope that he's not just stuck into general population, because he will learn from them. And the thing that concerns me more than him learning about how to commit crimes or avoid the system or anything like that, the thing that concerns me is him learning how to better justify and minimize and avoid facing responsibility, because he's still not, as much as he says, accepts that, yeah, I did this. Yes, this was wrong. He's not quite all the way there. And fair enough. I don't expect him to be, but you can't just overlook that. You can't pretend that's not there because you feel bad for what he's been through. And I'm sitting here saying, oh, look at his foundation, look at, research about obeying authority, all the things I'm saying. We, as people, we have to draw the lines somewhere. And this is where it gets challenging. And this is part of why we need lawyers to advocate on behalf of people. Where do you draw these lines? Now, we in the public don't have access to his psychological records, to a whole lot of information that would be very helpful in determining the best course of action to take with this young man. I know there's information out there. A lot of it is rumor. A lot of it is spin. Those of you who have followed me for any length of time know I don't deal in rumor. So there's still a lot of information that the judge is going to have. And I like this judge that they're dealing with. I think they will make a prudent decision based on more information than what we have. So in saying he suffered, and in some respects, he was totally snowed, in order to heal, in order to improve, you have to first face the truth. There can be no moving forward without the truth. And that's tough. That's tough for the best of us to face the truth of what we did. And if you did something that horrible, that's going to be tough. And there are lots of people who have suffered and don't go on to harm anyone else. There are people who go the opposite way. So in itself, having suffered is not an excuse by itself, but you can see, I hope, how the environment can really shift the entire way that you think. And where do we get our belief systems? Where do they come from? They don't just magically appear, right? It's what we're exposed to. It's what we learn. Those things are learned.
So after that point, I myself, when I was told to put him in the zip ties, I'd grab a pair of scissors and snip off the ends to make sure that he couldn't tighten it to where it was cutting anything off.
Were you guys ever zip tying his hands together?
His hands, I think we did once when we had a pair of them the zip cuffs.
Okay.
But again, I cut those off to make sure that he wouldn't tighten them. Yeah, because
what was that for? Why would you use those to
He's admitting to using these zip cuffs and zip ties as if it's normal, and adds, but I made sure they weren't cutting off his circulation, and I made sure that I cut off those ends because he tightened them. Well, you know what? He probably tightened them while he was attempting to get out of them. Paul is acting like this is normal. Shanda did this all through trial. She tried to normalize all kinds of horrible things when it was just so extreme. And she does it all with a straight face. So I don't know how much maltreatment was normalized even before he got to Shanda, because we know that his first situation was pretty horrible. I mean, we know it would have been normalized once he got to be with Shanda. So he's had, as far as I can tell, nothing to say that's not normal. If you talk to adults who have suffered horrible things as children, you'll hear, and I've heard from victims who are even in their senior years, just realizing, you know what? That wasn't normal. I grew up thinking that was normal and it wasn't. Or I grew up thinking it was okay and it wasn't. So even though he's working and he's exposed to the outside world, which should give him some cues and some different frames of reference, we don't know how in-depth any conversation went or how any interactions went. We don't know what he was exposed to and what would challenge his thinking. That's just one thing that keeps running through my mind when I hear him speak like it's perfectly normal. I mean, if nothing else, he needs a lot of therapy to even understand what is normal.
I think the zip ties, cuffs, probably when we first used them, it was when I would leave, when I would get ready to leave for work, I'd put them on, do the whole snipping, and then when Mama would get home, she'd grab the scissors and cut them off immediately.
Yeah. How long are we talking? This is for...
Mama would immediately cut them off. He doesn't know that. Now, I don't know if Shanda told him that or if he's just making this up right now to protect her. But again, his goal here is still to protect Shanda, to justify her. If he really wanted to save himself, if his interest was all about him, he'd throw her under the bus. And he's not smart enough to do it subtly. But he doesn't. He's protecting her the whole way, even after he hears that she tried to throw him under the bus. He's still protecting her. And again, you'll see that with people who have been mistreated. They will protect the abuser. They will take the blame or blame somebody else, but whatever justification that the abuser has provided, the victim will adopt that.
Does he have pants on or no pants on?
None, no.
And when we get there, he has pants on.
Yeah, she had me put them on.
She asked you to put pants on. What
was
that for?
I don't know.
And so you guys, at that time, she decided.
So Shanda has figured out she needs to cover this up, and so she's going to get Paul to put pants on Timothy before the first responders get there. And he doesn't. And when he's asked why, he doesn't know.
And she had asked you to put hot sauce directly into his mouth. Did you do that?
Yes.
Is that on the 5th, the day kind of leading up to all this stuff?
Yeah.
How much hot sauce did you put in there?
That.
And whose idea was that to put that hot sauce in there?
Hers.
And what was the purpose of that?
Notice when he asked, did you do this thing? Did you put the hot sauce in his mouth? He doesn't hedge. It's yes. He doesn't provide an excuse. Yes. That's a good sign. I'm not saying what he did was okay or good, but it's also interesting to me when he justifies and minimizes the most and when he lies. And the times when he struggles and lies are the times when he needs to protect Shanda. He doesn't lie here to protect himself. This may not be the best place actually to insert this, but I'm going to anyway, because if I don't, I'll forget. There is something called identification with the offender. So if you're in a situation, you don't have any feasible escape from that situation, and you're either physically or psychologically beaten down. There are a whole bunch of things that have to be in place for this. People end up doing what's called identifying with the offender. You end up in a place where your choices are to be a victim or to have power. And the only way to have power is to be that offender. is to be like that offender, like that person. So you align with them. And in situations like hostage situations or kidnapping where somebody's being held for a period of time, that identification with the offender at that time is actually functional because it can save the victim's life. It becomes dysfunctional when they're then out of that situation and still identifying with the offender. So they will protect the offender. They will try and be like the offender. And oftentimes as I listen to Paul and watch Paul, I can't help but think that there may be some of that happening here. Just another thing to think about.
Back in Oklahoma, he was also even destructive at school, destroying textbooks, desks, really anything.
So
he was a destructive child.
There's a song that
That he was a destructive child. I mean, that's again a reach for justification. So Paul has been trained to view Timothy in a certain way. So it appears that his thought process is well on its way to being developed in the same manner as Shanda. And I mean, this is one of the reasons why he can't just be let go. That thought process is dangerous. This is something that Shanda was very good at. And this is something, if you've dealt with narcissists or any number of other kinds of offenders, and I'm not saying that narcissists are always offenders because they're not, you've seen this pattern before, this vilify the victim. And the statement that Timothy was a destructive child is a full characterization of this is who he is. I'm not saying he's not responsible. I am saying that going down this road is dangerous, not just for him, but for anyone around him. This guy needs some serious and long-term intervention.
She told you, right? She told you what to say. Okay. She told you what to say. Because why? Did she tell you why? Does it look bad for you guys?
It's not just that. We loved him.
Can I ask you this, like, straight up?
When he has to admit that Shanda told him to lie, listen to how quietly he says it. He finally admits it, but you can see he doesn't want to admit it. I don't think this is about him being afraid of what she's going to do to him. Speaking a truth out loud makes it more real, if that makes sense. And so his reality and his whole belief system is being challenged right now by even speaking the words.
Feel like this was love? That he's dead now because he couldn't eat food. Does that feel like love to you?
No.
He's dead because he couldn't eat.
No.
And I don't know anybody that thinks that's love. What I think's happening is your mom's convinced you that she's this perfect person. And she's asking you to do all these things that are literally killing your brother.
I know she's not perfect.
How is that love? How is love? How is love ice baths? How is love? How is love?
Did you see that? He does this. Can we stop? So remember earlier he said he has trouble with emotion and he doesn't show emotion. Right here, he is at the point where he's going to break. I mean, for somebody who's normally emotive, this doesn't look like a big display. I get that. But for him, for somebody who has learned how to suppress that really well, he's really at his breaking point. He's really on the edge, and he even does the, can we stop? Notice where he's saying this. Notice where this reaction is coming in. The big reaction is not about, Paul, you're a bad guy. The big, oh my God, I can't handle this, is when the detective is challenging him about the concept of love. When the idea that maybe his mother, what she calls love, isn't love. Maybe his mother, who he believed loved Timothy, maybe that's not love. And if that's not love, if Shanda is something else, if it's not who he believed, I mean, that threatens the core belief that he's been hanging onto, that he has been clinging to, that has been a lifeline, especially after his father kicked him out. And that is that what he believed was a revelation that his mother actually loved him. What core human need is that? To have your mother love you. And those of you who have mothers who don't fit Hallmark's version, you understand this. You understand how soul-crushing it is to realize that your own mother doesn't love you. And he is on the precipice of this. He is being challenged here. And that's what's too much.
Sounds like to me it started after stepdad left the house.
Because Timothy would take advantage of that situation. We were all stressed. And he would take advantage of that. Anything he can find to take advantage of. Almost his entire life, except for, I think, when he was still a baby.
So Timothy is being characterized as taking advantage of their stress. There is no recognition that maybe Timothy is under stress with the rest of the family. Now, that's not Paul's responsibility here to recognize that and take action on it. That was Shanda's responsibility. What I'm more focused on, though, is the fact that it is being characterized at all. And let me give you an example. Something we frequently see in CA cases is that the parent assigns meaning or intention behind a child's actions that's related to the parent, claiming that a toddler is only doing this to bother me. So they assign the intention and meaning, and it's egocentric for the parent. And not only does that justify the parent acting out, it also can add to the dysfunctional parent's frustration. I don't know why the toddler's doing that. And so I assign this meaning because I feel something. It must be about me. So there's this whole other, sort of level of immaturity that's going on. But parents who do that, assign that meaning and assign that intention that's egocentric to the parent, that is a big red flag, a big indicator that if there's not already CA in the home, there's going to be. Even if it doesn't happen physically, there is going to be some sort of maltreatment. So here we're seeing Paul saying, that Timothy took advantage. We're not hearing exactly what he did or how they came to the conclusion that he's taking advantage. The label and the assignment is just put on Timothy. And my guess is that that's coming from Shanda because she's the one saying, oh, he's just faking. This is why he's doing it. This is what we need to do. Give him the hot sauce. Give him this, that, the other punishment. Again, this is another concerning thought process that's happening here. And regardless of where it came from, there needs to be intervention. Nobody's sitting back and saying, well, maybe if the whole household is stressed and Timothy is part of that household, maybe he's stressed too. It looks like that never even occurred to anybody. Or the parent who it's supposed to occur to didn't bother to think about it.
He was just going to be good. And all of a sudden he was going to start behaving and doing everything she said because she didn't feed him food?
I don't know.
What did she think was going to happen?
I don't know.
Exactly what happened is what she thought was going to happen. At some point he wasn't going to wake up.
She never wanted him dead. She loved him.
That's love to you? Everything that we talked about is love? How? Who do you love in your life?
My family?
Have you ever thought about starving them?
No, of course.
Have you ever thought about not giving them food as a punishment?
No, of course.
This is interesting. Who do you love? My family. This officer lists the things that were done to Timothy. Well, Timothy is Paul's brother. And the officer's saying, well, would you do these things to your family? And the answer from Paul is no. And that makes me wonder, did he not see him as family? Or is he just, responding? He's not thinking that far, just responding under the pressure here. Because he's really feeling the pressure that there's such a conflict in his head, right?
You sent that to her, didn't you?
Yeah.
You sent that to her on July 5th. Right before the day leading up to him being found dead. Does he look like he's okay right there?
No.
Why'd you send that picture?
I was concerned.
Yeah, once again, you're not the smartest person in the room and you're concerned. Did she do anything about it? No, you know what she said? He's going to sleep in the bath all night tonight. He's sleeping in the bath all night tonight. The smartest woman in the room.
The other thing I want to point out too is if you see something happening with a kid, who do you tell? You tell their parent, right? Hey, I think he needs more food. I mean, so Paul is telling the person who's supposed to take care of Timothy, who's supposed to know better, who he believes knows what to do. He's very proud of her achievement in school. So he is telling the person he's supposed to tell. Now, could he have also told somebody else? Could he have decided to call 911? I think my brother needs a hospital. Yeah, he could have. And there are times during this interrogation where the officer suggests, maybe you sometimes enjoyed being in charge. Maybe sometimes you enjoyed punishing him. And you know what? That's a possibility. That there were moments where Paul got a reward or a release in tension or a sense of feeling important or in power or a sense of, getting mom's approval for inflicting these things. So and that goes beyond sibling rivalry, right? We're way beyond that. I think that there may well have been an element of that present. And that's another reason, again, it's not black and white. He was also a perpetrator and he's not 12. So there is somewhere where these lines have to be drawn where he does have to be held accountable. No matter what you think, whether there should be more of a focus on punishment or more of a focus on rehabilitation, in any event, if he's going to ever be released, this guy needs serious therapy, not just for himself, but to protect society. He needs therapy.
That's how we ended up here. The smartest woman in the room took advantage of you. And she asked you to do these things over and over and over again. And this is the woman you're sitting here saying she cares so much. Does she really though? She asked you to handcuff your brother, pour hot sauce in his mouth. She asked you to pour hot sauce on his penis. Your mother asked you to do those things. Because she cares so much. She put you in that spot. And now you're right in the middle of an investigation in which your brother died. And this is criminal. This is a crime. Did your brother deserve to die?
No.
Should he be dead right now?
No.
Is he dead by the choices of others?
Yeah.
Who made those choices? Who made the choices for him to be dead right now? Did you make some of those choices?
No.
Who made those choices?
Mama?
Yeah. She did, didn't she? That's what's real.
While it's true that the mother made the choices and mother gave the direction, Paul did make choices. There was one thing he said he wouldn't do, one punishment that she asked for and he didn't do. There was another time that he, without her knowledge, made him eggs. So, yes, Shanda is the most responsible. The biological father bears some responsibility, and I don't know why he isn't charged with anything. I don't get that. Anyway, Paul did have a choice. How much of a choice and all of the factors that influenced his thinking and influenced his choosing is up for discussion. And I go back again to Milgram's experiment on obedience to authority and then add in all the other factors at play here. And as much as one might be able to argue the opposite, that, well, really he didn't have a choice because of all of these influences acting upon him for his sake, until he comes to a place where he admits, I thought I didn't have a choice, but I did. I failed to recognize that I had a choice. I failed to recognize what my choices were. He's not going to move past. He has to see what was happening for what it is. And the fact is, like, the cold fact, take emotion out of it. The cold fact is that he did have a choice. Did he recognize it? Was he in a place where he could exercise it fully? Did he understand the nature and the consequences? I mean, we could talk about that all day long, but he did have a choice. So he has to come to a place where he accepts that, and where he accepts that he made the wrong choice. And this wasn't a thing that happened one time. I made a bad choice and it caused an accident. This was a thing that was ongoing. I made bad choices over and over. So here he's accepting that it's Shanda. And on the witness stand, I was going to go over some of his testimony, but I think that video is going to end up being way too long. On the stand, he repeatedly said, well, as directed by my mother. And at the time I was watching that, I thought, was he coached to say it that way? Did somebody tell him, you need to drive home this point, right? I don't know. It's possible that he had, by that time, come to a point where it's dawned on him, because he also wouldn't call her mother or mama. He was calling her Shanda. He was trying to emotionally distance himself. There were moments during the trial when he would look at her, he would glance at Shanda and cringe, like almost in fear. And then other times when he would look at her and you could see the anger. So he's still on this roller coaster, this process of uncovering, what was reality and what's my role. So hopefully he keeps going with that, but he hasn't fully accepted responsibility, his part of the responsibility, and he needs to do that. And I think, this is my opinion, I'm not a judge, right? And I'm also not privy to everything that the judge is going to have, but I do think there has to be some accountability for him. He can't be allowed to just shrug his shoulders and say it was all somebody else's fault, because he can't learn unless he accepts his role. That's my rant for that part. I have no idea if I just made sense. I want to say something to anyone listening who might be grappling with a relationship with someone like Paul. You may understand why they are like they are. You might feel compassion for them, but that does not mean you have to expose yourself to maltreatment. There is a difference between understanding and excusing. And it's not your job to help that person. In fact, you probably should not be the one to try to help. Removing yourself from the reach of someone like that does not mean that you don't care. Perpetrator behavior is not okay. We as a society can understand and still say, you can't do that. Imagine if everyone was allowed to commit crimes because they had a bad history. It's my opinion that if Timothy had lived, Paul would have continued to do what he was doing. And he would have continued to develop and entrench the thought patterns that justified it all. Would have continued to receive reinforcement reward for perpetrator behavior. And he would have become worse and eventually become a risk to others. What you are seeing is a monster in the making. At this point, there is still a chance for Paul, but he needs intervention. He is both a victim and a perpetrator, and the justice system has a rare chance here. Paul's choice now is to become a survivor or a monster. I don't believe he recognizes that's a choice at all, or that he has that much of a choice. In any case, he cannot do it alone. He doesn't have the resources and the foundation to be capable of doing it without a whole lot of help. Thanks for hanging out with me and being willing to think about this difficult and serious subject. There are other Pauls out there. Trust your gut. See you in the comments.